Hey there, Kenny here. This is a reimagining of the Echoes of Wisdom announcement trailer and was written before any more information about the game came out. It was a little fun practice writing that I decided to turn into audio play format, meaning it won't be one-to-one with the trailer or the game. I made some creative changes, just for funsies. That being said, thank you for watching and please enjoy.
Link's footsteps echoed as he ran through the stone corridor, his inconspicuous shadow dancing across the floor as he passed the feeble torches on the walls. He tightened the clasp of his dark hooded cloak, completely covering his bright green tunic in order to blend in with the shadows surrounding him, turning corners and weaving his way through the maze. It wasn't long before a few figures came into view. They were grotesque beings, burly with large stomachs protruding from the makeshift vests they wore. Their skin was thick and varicose, their intimidating yellow eyes were filled with rage, and their large heads resembled misshapen boars. Each beast held a machete, roughly hewn yet still wicked sharp. Link slowed his steps, the echoes of his footfalls diminishing, then ceasing as he came to a full stop. Obscured in shadow, he observed their behavior to determine if their floppy ears had heard his approach. He watched as the beasts interacted with one another, their snouts wrinkling and moving as they snorted and growled, seemingly communicating casually through their guttural, brutish chatter. Link grinned confidently as he silently reached over his shoulder. He could catch them by surprise. In an instant, he drew the sword from where it had been hidden beneath his cloak, its purple winged hilt sparkling, its blade emanating radiant and luminous light. Gripping the sword by its green-strapped handle, Link dashed forward with incredible speed. Link struck before the first pair of creatures even realized they were in danger, the first beast's head rolling off its shoulders and onto the ground, its body collapsing mere seconds later. The second monster's eyes widened in disbelief before barely noticing the glint of light beneath him. It jumped back, avoiding the next quick swipe of Link's blade. With an enraged shriek, the beast raised its machete, preparing to strike the young warrior down. Link swung before it could attack. The machete fell with an echoing clank, still clutched in the monster's fist. The beast looked at its severed hand and shrieked again, this time in pain, before Link dealt the final blow. Link shook the remains from his blade as he watched their bodies evaporate into purple smoke, then stealthily continued down the dark corridors of the fortress, only emerging from the shadows to dispatch any monster he encountered. Eventually, he arrived at a staircase lined with larger torches, leading higher into the keep. He was getting close. Abruptly, Link skidded to a stop, his pointed ears twitching. He could hear the clanking of metal from around the next corner. Furrowing his brow, he crept toward the wall and, remaining hidden, peeked around the corner. There he saw a large stone door, bigger than any other door in the fortress. It was also the most heavily guarded, with 3 armored warriors standing in battle formation, axes in their hands. That would be a problem. The creature behind the door would hear if a fight broke out between him and the 3 Dark Knights. He had to end them quickly if he wanted to maintain his advantage in the upcoming final encounter. Studying the guards, one on each side of the door and another standing in front of them, he considered his options. He looked down at the sword in his hand as an idea formed and received a soft chime and pulse of light in confirmation. With a nod, he looked back at the knights. He had one chance, and it had to be fast.
Let's do this.
In another burst of speed, Link charged from the shadows, his cloak billowing behind him, stopping when he was in the center of the three knights. Before they could react, his sword glowing brighter, he adjusted his grip, spun on his heel, and released a burst of power from the blade, trailing it around before it expanded outward and slammed against all three knights, denting their armor as it knocked them back. Simultaneously, they crashed against the stone walls, a web of cracks forming where they struck, and vanished into purple smoke, leaving Link alone in front of the door. As the light of the sword's blade dimmed, Link straightened his posture and turned back to look at the large stone door behind him. Stepping toward the door, he reached into one of his back pockets and pulled out a large, sharp-edged iron key, adorned with a purple gem in the bow. Link placed the key in the keyhole. Automatically, the key turned, causing the stone door to rise, revealing one last staircase. Gripping his sword tighter, Link began walking up the stairs. Each step felt heavy, the atmosphere growing denser the higher he went. Purple mist poured down the stairs, pooling around Link's boots. The evil entity waiting above knew he was there. Stealth was no longer an option. His brow furrowed, but still he continued, one step after another, until eventually he reached the top. Link peered into the circular chamber, empty except for the massive throne, where an enormous beast sat awaiting his arrival. It resembled all the other monsters Link had faced on his way here, except his skin was even grimier, blue in color and thick as steel. He was 3 times the size of the other beasts, his face more porcine than the rest. Instead of yellow, his luminous eyes smoldered red with malevolence, matching the blood-red armor he wore. The King of Evil snorted upon the sight of the small young man.
So, you managed to make it this far. I'm impressed. I assume you came for her?
He gestured upward, prompting Link to look above the throne. Hovering above the boar's throne was a woman encased in a large pink crystal. She wore an ornate pink gown, her blonde hair flowing down her back, and her brown eyes glistening with worry. She rapped against the crystal, shouting his name, her voice muffled inside the rose-tinted gem.
Link! Princess Zelda!
Link quickly scanned the room for hidden traps or lurking enemies, but there was only Ganon, sitting on his throne, an amused, sharp-toothed grin on his face.
I have come for her.
He reached up and unclasped his cloak.
I'm taking her back to the kingdom where she belongs, but only after I take you down, Ganon.
He tossed the cloak aside, revealing his green tunic and pointed hat. Ganon gave a hearty laugh.
We'll see about that, boy. You'd best prepare that sword of yours, for I won't be so easily defeated.
The beast stood, the throne's stone armrests cracking under the weight, revealing his true height as he stared down at the young man. He held out a grotesque hand, summoning an unusual weapon to his clutch, a double-bladed, double-sided battle axe with a long purple strapped handle.
Come, show me what you can do.
Both Link and Ganon dashed towards each other. Suddenly, the head of the axe began to glow purple, a dark cloud of malice emanating from the blades. Link's eyes widened as he jumped, flipping out of the way of a piercing attack. The axe merely grazed his tunic as it passed. For such a large creature, he hadn't expected such speed. Before he landed, Link swiped with his sword, striking the boar during the descent. Skidding away, he readied his sword, taking a blue and silver shield off his back. Wincing, The boar disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Link looked around the room, his eyes darting back and forth before noticing the purple smoke reappear. There Ganon stood in the middle of the room, growling as he held out a large hand. Above his palm, an orb of intense orange energy gathered, its power causing the room to shudder, dirt falling from the crevices in the ceiling. It coalesced into a tremendous orb of power, and the boar raised it in the air before striking it with his axe. The orb flew across the room, its shape warping with the speed of its flight. With only a split second to react, Link swiped with his sword, the glow of the blade intensifying exponentially with increased power, repelling the evil energy back at the boar. The two knocked the orb of power back and forth, the speed at which it flew increasing with each strike. Finally, the axe blade missed. With a shock, the energy exploded on Ganon's chest, and he roared in pain. Angered, the boar stomped towards Link, swiping with his axe. Link raised his shield, deflecting the axe just in time, yet Ganon swung again. He continued his barrage of attacks, the shield's blue and red paint scratching with each strike. Link could feel his legs beginning to give way before suddenly, the boar swung differently, giving him just the opening he needed to reciprocate. Link struck him on his side, the force sending Ganon crashing into the wall and knocking Link back several feet, his shield clattering to the ground, leaving him with just his sword. With a yell, he gripped the hilt with both hands and ran toward Ganon, who angrily swung his axe again. The blades clashed, sparks flying as they pushed against each other, battling for dominance. Link gritted his teeth, taking a step forward as he pushed the boar back. Ganon looked surprised, even scared, at the astounding strength of the man. He was so small, just a highling, and yet he was pushing him, the king of evil, back. Giving another powerful yell, he pushed Ganon back, causing the beast to stumble and fall to the ground. The beast tried to pick himself up, yet fell to his knees, disoriented from the attack. Link leapt upward, blade glowing, and spun in the air before slamming the sword against Ganon's cheek. The boar crumpled to the ground, letting his axe go as he fell. Ganon let loose an echoing roar, shaking the fortress before bursting into a cloud of purple light and smoke. Link raised his sword, defending himself against the blast of smoke, preparing for whatever attack came next, yet nothing happened. The smoke soon dissipated, leaving just the axe, which remained where it had fallen with a clatter. He continued to look around the room, his sword ready, but nothing came at him. Finally, he lowered his blade, allowing his body to relax. Looking up, he offered the princess a smile, who smiled back in return. He walked across the room, picking up the cloak that he'd discarded when he began his duel with Ganon. His steps echoed, and he smiled as he kept his gaze locked with Zelda's warm brown eyes. He stepped past the axe, preparing to climb the stone steps to the throne, until he noticed the princess's eyes widen in shock. Suddenly, his pointed ears twitched, hearing the low rumble of power behind him. Readying his sword again, he turned as the axe vibrated on the ground. It rose from the stone, lifting itself into the air. Dark purple malice began to pour from its bottom head, dripping onto the stone floor of the throne room. Before Link could react, the axe shot downward, piercing its bottom tip into the floor. The room shook as concentrated malice erupted from the axe. Cracks began to form in the stone floor, yet these weren't normal cracks. They were a bright pink, opening to a purple-filled void. The cracks expanded, quickly spreading toward Link. He tried to move, but stumbled and winced, injured by his fight against the evil king. The fissures caught his boot, causing him to trip onto the stone floor. Having captured its prey, the axe slowly began to sink into the purple void. Link felt an invisible force pulling on his leg, and he slid against the stone. He reached out, digging his fingernails into the floor, but the force was unrelenting. It was as if the axe was dragging him down with it. First his ankle, then his calf, before reaching his other leg. She banged against her crystal prison, watching helplessly as Link continued to sink. Gritting his teeth, Link pulled as hard as he could, yet no amount of strength seemed enough to free him. Breathing heavily and feeling the unseen force intensify on his legs, he looked between the void of darkness and Zelda's scared brown eyes. He looked down at the purple-winged sword in his hands. It pulsed with light, but nothing else. It was up to him to figure out what was next. He looked down at the void once more, his thighs sinking in, before steeling himself to do what he must. His sword clattered to the ground as he reached back into his pouch. With a flash, a bow appeared in his hands. Grateful that such a pouch could hold large items, he aimed the bow toward Zelda's crystal and nocked an arrow. Drawing the bowstring back, he let the arrow fly, cracking Zelda's crystal prison with its strike. The crystal cracked, though this didn't bring any joy to Zelda's wildly beating heart. She knew exactly what he was doing. She continued to bang against her crystal as Link continued to sink, the void now up to his waist. Soon, the crack grew larger. Gaining an idea, she gritted her teeth, her hands beginning to glow. Closing her eyes, she pressed her hands against the crack. The glowing intensified, the crack in the crystal doubling in size, then trembling, before eventually it shattered. The princess dropped down to the stone steps, scraping her knees as she landed, but she ignored the pain. She quickly stood, rushing to the pink cracks that were taking Link from this world. Falling to her knees before him, she looked around at what remained of his upper body, frantically trying to come up with a solution. Yet Link simply smiled.
Hey, Princess, you need to go.
I am not leaving you.
She grabbed his arm and stood, beginning to pull as hard as she could, yet Link didn't budge.
Zelda.
She released his arm and took a step back. Raising her arms, her palms began to glow once more, trying whatever magical ability she had, yet the cracks didn't budge. Still, she continued, sweat dripping down her face as she worked, desperately trying to pull him from the void.
Zelda.
The sternness in Link's voice caused her to stop, the light fading from her hands. She looked down into his face, his eyes calm and his smile warm.
The cracks are growing. If you don't leave now, you'll get swallowed up too. And Hyrule can't afford that.
I am not leaving you.
She fell to her knees at the edge of the cracks again, yet she could tell Link was a little further away than before. Looking around the cracks, her eyes were soon drawn to the purple-winged sword that had been caught in the void, now sinking along with Link and Ganon's axe.
The Master Sword. Maybe it has a solution, power, something we don't know it can do.
It doesn't.
But...
It doesn't. Zelda, you need to get out of here. The kingdom needs its princess. You're the only one who can stop this.
But I got captured without you around. I can't do this without you.
Yes, you can. You're strong. One of the strongest people I've ever met. I went on this adventure to save you. And now it's your turn to adventure and save everyone else.
Taking the cloak he had picked up, he threw it around Zelda's shoulders, and though the void was up to his chest, his smile widened without falter.
Go. Save your kingdom. Save our kingdom.
With tears streaming down Zelda's face, she gripped Link's hand and squeezed.
I will, but I won't just save our kingdom. I'll save you as well. I promise.
As she spoke this, the Master Sword sank completely into the void, the axe almost fully enveloped, and Link with just his chest and above remaining. At her words, he seemed slightly taken aback, yet his smile returned after just a second.
I'll be waiting for you.
Don't you dare die. Promise me that.
Link hesitated, yet the princess squeezed his hand even tighter.
Promise me.
Link hesitated again, yet catching the determined look in her eye, he nodded.
I promise.
Suddenly, the cracks began to pulse as the axe disappeared entirely into the void. Noticing he had begun to sink, the cracks growing at an alarming rate, he gave Zelda a stern look.
Now go! Get out of here! Go!
Zelda hesitated for a second more, and Link pushed her to safety with the last of his reach.
Go!
With tears running down her face, Zelda gritted her teeth. Looking away, she gripped the cloak around her shoulders before running around the cracks, following the edge of the room and darting down the stairs. She chanced one more look back at Link. Before he could disappear into the void entirely, he managed to give a few final words with a smile on his face.
I believe in you, Zelda.
Suddenly, the fortress began to shake violently, the malicious pink-hued power pulsing with even more noxious light. The cracks rapidly expanded, the void growing larger as it covered the fortress floor entirely. It chased after Zelda, trying mightily to swallow her up as well. Panting, Zelda ran as fast as she could, dashing through the shaking corridors, occasionally tripping over her feet, yet managing to regain her footing as she continued on. She looked back, her dark cloak billowing behind her, confirming that the cracks were right on her heel. Around the corners and through the doors, she ran and ran. Finally, she saw a bright light, the exit. She just had to make it in time. With the last of her strength, she bolted out of the fortress, her feet stomping through the grass. The ground still shook, and now that it was uneven, Zelda tripped again, unable to regain her balance. Tumbling through the dirt, she looked back at the cracks, still coming her way. Horrified, she raised up a hand, closing her eyes in fear, and yet, nothing happened. Lowering her hand, Zelda surveyed the damage, her eyes widening at the sight. The fortress had become a void of dark matter. Now that it was so large, she could see into its depths. It looked as though chunks of land were floating around in there, whole islands and trees, even buildings. Going against her common sense, she ran to the edge of the cracks and peered into the void.
Link!
Despite her calls, no response came to her, and she couldn't see him at all. Her hope falling, she sat in the grass next to the void, bringing her knees to her chin as she wrapped her arms around them, grabbing the dark cloak that had been wrapped around her body.
Link. Oh, Link.
Link? Where did he go?
He was taken, enveloped by this curse of evil.
Zelda suddenly stood in shock and looked around. Who had spoken to her? That was a new voice, one she had not recognized.
So, he's gone? That isn't good. But with you now safe, we may be okay. I think you can handle it with your magic. You should be able to. You can. You can wield the rod.
The rod?
The rod. The rod. You can use the tri-rod. If you have it, then we'll be saved.
But who are you? What's the...
Princess Zelda!
Zelda turned to see two knights running toward her. They skidded to a halt and genuflected.
We saw the explosion from the castle and rushed here as soon as we could. It's a miracle to find you safe.
Looks like you're busy right now. I'll come find you. Just wait. I'll find you in no time.
You'll find me?
Though her question was meant for the voice, it was the knight who answered.
We already found you, Your Highness. Princess, what do we do now? What is our next move?
Zelda hesitated, looking back at the pink cracks and purple void.
I'm not sure. For now, let us head back to the castle. We'll figure it out from there.
Yes, Princess.
Standing, the two began to walk down the path. Zelda took a step to follow, then stopped and looked back at the pulsing void again.
I'll save you. I will, Link. Just as you saved me.
With a confident look, she turned and began following the guards, her dark cloak billowing behind her as they headed toward the castle in the distance.
Hi. It looks like I have a lot of time down here now that I'm stuck in the still world. So while Zelda is off saving Hyrule, I'll close this video. Thank you all for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. If you want more content like this, check out the Couple of the Wild audio play, where another version of Zelda and I are starting their own adventure together in the wild. Make sure to check out all the voice actors, musicians, and artists who worked on this episode. If you want to read more Zelda books, you can find them in the description below. Again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. See you soon.
Hello, and welcome to prison.
Oh, this is gonna feel awesome to record. This is gonna be stupid.
We saw the explosion from the castle and rushed here as soon as we could. It's a miracle to find you safe. Shit! I fucked up the line. The boulder.
Yes, princess. Let's break the can. Oh, that was stupid.
So, you've managed to make it this far. I'm impressed. I assume you came for her. We'll see about that, boy. You'd best prepare that sword of yours, for I won't be easily. Fuck. You'd best be prepared. Fuck. I am dead. down into the pit. It burns!